you gonna let me have?
Now, time for Tell John, every Monday night at 7 p.m. here on 90.1 WMPR. We take you to Studio B for Tell John.
And good evening, Mississippi, and welcome to another edition of Tell John, a 1-hour weekly radio show hosted by yours truly, where I'll use my 30-some-odd years of experience in state government and the legislature to help solve problems at the local, state, or federal level for people who call or write in. We're going to deviate a little bit on our show and not take calls for the first few minutes in order to give our special guest as much time as possible. But we're also streaming tonight's broadcast live on Facebook. You can search for John Horhn, John H-O-R-H-N, 1955, or George Winford Sr., George W-I-N-F-O-R-D Sr., or if you want to listen online, you go to WMPR901FM.com. Whether you're having problems with Medicaid, disability, child care, whether it's about TANF, potholes, or crime, we want you to tell John, and we'll try to get you a positive answer. Now, we may not be able to fix it, but we're sure going to give it a try. Joining me tonight, as usual, is James J.R. Richardson, a retired law enforcement professional, sports enthusiast, advocate for Jackson, and a darn good friend. But first, you know, you cannot hide from your history, but your history can be hidden from you. Black history goes on 24/7, 365 days a year, and should not be relegated to 1 month out of each year in February. That's why we present Black Facts today on each and every show. Our history matters, and our impact on this country has been felt since day one. And guess what? We have the facts to prove it. Now, JR, on tonight's Black Facts Today, I want to mention that on this date, May 7th, 1787, the first African Lodge, number 459, was organized in Boston, Massachusetts, with Prince Hall as the Grand Master. Also on this date in 1931, it marks the birth of Willie Sayhays Mays. Willie Howard Mays Jr. is widely respected as a retired baseball professional who was born on this date in 1931 in Westfield, Alabama. He played almost 22 seasons in the major leagues, and he played with the New York and then later the San Francisco Giants, and he finished his career with the New York Mets. Mays was just a really endearing player that a lot of folks had a lot of respect for, and he had an infectious smile, and he is still living, so let's say hey to Willie Mays on his birthday. On this date in 1960, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed the Civil Rights Act of 1960. Also on this date in 1983, Gabori Sidibe, nicknamed Gabby, is an Academy Award nominated actress. She got her nomination for her film role, and I think it was her premiere acting role of a major film, playing the role of Precious. She made that debut in 2009, and she was born on this date in 1983 in Brooklyn, New York. On this date in 1967, 400 students seized the administration building at Cheney State College in Virginia, protesting the treatment of African American students on that campus. Also on this date in 1886, JR, inventor M.A. Cherry received a patent for, guess what? The tricycle. Yes, folks, a black man invented the tricycle, and his name was, excuse me, his name was M.A. Cherry, and he got his patent on this date in 1886. Martin Delany was one of the most remarkable men during the time of the Civil War era, and he, after meeting President Lincoln, Lincoln was so impressed by him, blacks were not given commissions in the military as officers. But after Abraham met with Martin Delany, he was an inventor, he was a novelist, he was a medical doctor, and Lincoln was so impressed by him, he sent word to Stanton, his Secretary of War, saying, "Do not fail to meet with this impressive black man and give him a commission as I think he got a commission as a captain in the military, making him the first African-American man, the first African-American period to be given an officer's commission in the United States." On this date in 1937, Reuben Carter, the Hurricane, who was a great boxer, but whose career was cut way, way short because of a trumped-up charge, and he was an innocent man charged with a crime he didn't commit, and he spent time in jail, and it severely shortened his career. But the Hurricane was born on this date in 1937. And finally, Lynn Whitfield was born on this date in 1953. A lot of us remember Lynn Whitfield because of her work as an actress and a producer. She is perhaps best known for her performance of Josephine Baker in the HBO biographical drama film, The Josephine Baker Story, which aired in 1991, and she won an Emmy for that outstanding performance. So this is Lynn Whitfield's birthday today, and in memory of Josephine Baker, we're going to just play a little Miss Josephine.
Come, gather around, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the water around you have grown, and accept this too. You'll be drenched to the bone if your time to you is worth saving. Then you better start. So when I used to think like a stone, for the times they are a changing. Come critics and come poets, criticize with your pens and keep your eyes wide open. Chance won't come again, and don't speak too soon, because the wheel still is spinning. There's no telling who, when it's a leaving.
All right, that was the late, great Josephine Baker. A lot of folks may have forgotten about Josephine Baker, but at one time she was the biggest stars, not in the U.S., but because she tried to pursue a career here, and this country's racism kept her from pursuing it in the way that she wanted to. So she wound up going to Europe and became the car celeb in France and other parts of Europe, and was just one of the biggest international stars this country ever produced, Miss Josephine Baker. All right, well, we're going to take a station break, and then when we come back, first, before we take that station break, I want to make an announcement. Eyes Wide Open, you all know Eyes. He has a show that he produces on Tuesday mornings at 9 o'clock. He's doing a live remote broadcast in support of yours truly, Senator John Horhn, and State Representative Deborah Gibbs of House District 72 from 9 to 10 a.m. a week from tomorrow. That's Tuesday, May 14th, a live remote at Charlene's Deli, 3919 Hanging Moss Drive. I will be hosting a Meet the Candidates breakfast, and Charlene will be serving a full free breakfast and coffee while supplies last at that event. Charlene's Deli is located at 3919 Hanging Moss Road in the strip mall right beside McDonald's. And remember, that's a week from tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Come get a free breakfast and meet the candidates. All right, we're going to take a station break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking with none other than Attorney General Jim Hood, who's running for the Democratic nomination and to be the next governor of the state of Mississippi. You're listening to Tell John. We'll be right back.
We are 90.1 FM WMPR on the worldwide radio at www.WOPR901fm.com. We are the voice of the community.
All right, we're back, and you're listening to Tell John. I'm Senator John Horhn, and as I mentioned before our break, we have Attorney General Jim Hood on the show with us tonight, and Jim's going to talk about his efforts to seek the Democratic nomination on his way to becoming the next governor of the state of Mississippi. And General, it's great to have you on the show. Let me mention, first of all, we're going to have a conversation with General Hood for the next 15 minutes or so. And then around 7:30, we're going to start taking phone calls for anybody who wants to call in. General, again, it's great to have you on Tell John. I've been wanting to have you on the show for a good little while, and welcome.
Well, John, thank you for having me. We worked together even back when I started out as a young Turk lawyer working for Mike Moore over in the legislature, and I've known you a long time, and your father, and
yeah.
You've got a good radio voice, so you're in the right place here, huh?
If it's not too raspy. Listen, so you started out, you've been in public service for about 25 years. You were an assistant United States attorney. You were
assistant attorney for Mike Moore for 5 years.
Oh, okay.
And then I was DA up in North.
Yeah, I know you were DA. I thought I saw in your bio you were an assistant U.S. attorney, but deputy assistant attorney general under Mike Moore.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, again, it's great to have you here. And for the listening audience, tell them something that you want them to know about Jim Hood, the man, Jim Hood, the father, or however you want to come at that.
You know, I've got 3 wonderful children, and my 10th grader just keeps it interesting all the time. You know, she comes in with some different angle all the time, and then my son.
See, now that's 15, 16.
Yeah, 15.
Yeah, she's got some angles for you, all right.
She's full of it. She works on her dad, and then my son is 20, Matthew, and then Rebecca is 23, and she's finishing up this semester, and of course my wife Debbie, she keeps it all held together. I live up in Northeast Mississippi, where I grew up and where I served as DA from Chickasaw County there in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I've been lucky to for the people to elect me as Attorney General since 1003.
You've been in for 16 years.
Yeah, this is my 16th year as Attorney General.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't, for those of us in the listening audience who may not know where it is, Houston is kind of sort of up towards Northeast Mississippi, right?
Yeah, it's up near Tupelo. It's about 35 miles southwest of Tupelo, right off the Natchez Trace. I mean, that's where I grew up and went to school and go to church, and you know, that's home.
Well, I know that you mentioned Mike Moore, and Mike is, I think, probably one of his biggest claims to fame is the Consumer Protection Division, helping to strengthen it while he was Attorney General. But he was one of the original attorneys general who filed lawsuits against Big Tobacco on the smoking cessation effort and to ban cigarette smoking in a lot of places, and to get a lot of these companies to pony up for the damage that they knowingly did with the production of cigarettes. But you've carved out quite a career for yourself at the Attorney General's office. You've been able to get involved with the BP settlement and a lot of other big cases. Would you mind telling us a little bit about those?
Yeah, I was in AG's office when Mike was contemplating filing that litigation. I didn't think it would be successful, but it was
nobody did.
successful.
Quite frankly, nobody did.
Over $1 billion that the state has recovered. We still get $100 million a year from that litigation. And our office in the past 16 years, we recovered about $3 billion for the taxpayers. Wow. And $2 billion of that was BP. Would give a billion, give or take a billion. You got some real money,
Right. Well, where does that money go?
Well, a lot of it's gone to the legislature. A lot of it's gone back to the citizens themselves who were injured.
Right. Okay.
In the State Farm litigation, which entails several other insurance companies after Hurricane Katrina, we returned quite a bit of money back to the ratepayer, back to the people who were injured, as well as after BP, of course, a lot of that went to the state,
right.
And it's still going to the state. Like WorldCom, I mean, when I first came in, we settled it for $100 million, and plus we got a building downtown, and it's entailed all kind of corporations that have taken advantage, pharmaceutical companies that have overcharged, some by 1,000%. That was $200 million alone, just average wholesale price litigation that we've recovered on behalf of the taxpayers, and I've sent it over to the legislature and encouraged them to do some things, on mental health and different issues, and of course you've been there supporting that, but unfortunately
the leadership didn't.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, and were you involved with any asbestos cases?
No, those have pretty much passed before I came into office, but a lot of after the Great Recession that was caused by the big banks in New York, I was the second Attorney General to file suit against the credit rating agency. Standard & Poor's, one of the main ones, and that was rewarding settlement that we negotiated with them. It brought the state about $30-something million, but that outfit, they portrayed themselves as if they were peers of driven snow. They tried to say that, we're weighing these mortgage tranches, knowing that they weren't any good, and it cost people their livings, and almost put our country into another Great Depression. Had not.
And speaking of costing people their living, this what do you call it? The deal where a person gets investors to come in and
those Ponzi schemes.
The Ponzi schemes.
Yeah.
Couldn't think of that.
Man, when it gets late afternoon, some of the time, I'm just to hit 57. I had those senior.
Look, I want to see 57 again.
But there's a lot of people that have been conned out of their money, that had money to invest, and they had money to hire advisors and lawyers to try to help them on the front end of those investments. And what really makes me sick, though, is when people that lose it, that can't afford to lose it. And like after Katrina, there was some contractors, our Mississippi ones did right, but a lot of them came in here and just took the money and ran and just left people with nothing, just destitute.
Right.
And that's truly the fun part of my office. Bridget Williams is from here in Jackson. She's over. Bridget's over my Consumer Protection Division.
Right.
Mike Espy actually started the Consumer Protection Division in the AG's office.
Right.
But Bridget is over that, and we do a lot of work to outreach to the community, trying to reach people on issues of how to avoid scams and from everything from that to contracts for if you're going to get tree cutters to come in and try to clear things out. But the consumer has a tremendous outreach, and it's an outreach to those who need it the most. And my whole service as Assistant Attorney General and as DA and as Attorney General has been to fight for those who need it the most, the least among us. You know,
Exactly.
and that's been the fun part of my job, to be able to fight for those who can't fight for themselves.
Absolutely. Well, in addition to bringing $3 billion in from lawsuits that went against corporations that were doing bad things, and being a friend of consumer, I can tell you that Jim Hood has a passion for championing the rights of children who might suffer from exploitation and abuse, especially the internet predator situation. You've done a marvelous job with that. And you worked to be a watchdog over corporate wrongdoers, as we mentioned, the $3 billion. And when it came down to the Gulf Coast and making sure that folks who were in a recovery stage were not taken advantage of by a lot of predatory contractors and businesses that were applying unscrupulous principles in that process of recovery. So I want to commend you for that, and let's talk a little bit. I know we're in Hinds County, and I want to just mention just a little bit about this Robert Schuler Smith situation. A lot of folks in Hinds County have mixed feelings about what went on with that, and so I want them to hear from Jim Hood's mouth what was going on with that.
Yeah, you know, I was doing my job, like in 2005 when I tried that Mississippi burning case.
Right.
You know, that was one of those cases that, you know, it was not always a positive with a lot of people, but it was the right thing to do. And I've tried to always, as Assistant Attorney General, as DA, and as Attorney General, to treat people like I want to be treated. And so in that particular case, we were doing our job. It was the federal government and several state agencies involved in investigating those cases, and they did the work. We presented to a grand jury. They indicted. We went forward with the case, and the jury made decisions on those cases. And that's it. There wasn't anything personal. You know, I know his family, and so it was just simply doing our job. It was just business. It was part of the duties of being a prosecutor.
Gotcha. You mentioned that Mississippi burning case. That was that Edgar O. killing over in Philadelphia. One of the ringleaders of the assassination of Schreiner, Cheney, and Goodman, and in the summer of '64.
Yep, that was the case. I mean, I was 2 years old when it happened, but when I became Attorney General, I was asked, you know, what are you going to do about those cases? And I thought that it was, most of them were dead, but then I started investigating, and some witnesses came forward, and you know, helped put the case together. And we presented all of them that were living to the grand jury, and they indicted one, and his name was Edgar Ray Killen, who did organize that effort. So anyway, we put it to trial. I tried it along with the DA over there, who's now the judge over there, and we were successful in convicting him of 3 counts of felony manslaughter.
You know, I'm a good friend to Jerry Mitchell, and I've had Jerry on the show actually before, and I probably will have him on again soon. But I think the state of Mississippi owes that gentleman a debt of gratitude for his investigative reporting that uncovered some cases that had long been buried, and folks probably were thinking that they had gotten away with a whole bunch of things. And it's Jerry Mitchell's dogged reporting, and then it's district attorneys and attorneys general in our contemporary times who have not shied away from going after those cases. And I want, again, to commend you for making sure that at least the ringleader of the killings of James Cheney, Mickey Schwerner, and Andy Goodman, that they had at least the ringleader brought to justice, not on a violation of civil rights that they had been, some of them had been convicted of earlier, but for murder, for assassination. And again, I want to commend you for that. So why, you got this successful career. You're an attorney general. You can they've come at you several times to try to unseat you as attorney general. You're the only statewide elected Democrat in Mississippi, and they've come at you a few times trying to unseat you, and they haven't been able to. So why run for governor?
Well, I've enjoyed my tour of duty as Attorney General. Mike Moore served 16 years, and now I've served 16 years, and we've had a wonderful group of lawyers that I worked with. Onetta Whitley is one of our deputy attorneys general. There are only two of those by statute, but I just think about all those lawyers in there now that have got a little gray in their hair. So we've done our tour of duty there, and I think Mississippi is at a crucial point of where we've got to change our direction. If we don't, we're going to put our kids 10, 20, 30 years behind, and they may never catch up if we don't change what we're doing. And I think the votes have been in the legislature to do some things, and you talked to them on the floor of things like a road bill. That's 7,000 or 8,000 jobs. That's working people swinging hammers, and that's when you boost the economy. I mean, Bill Clinton showed us that. He showed us a lot, but he certainly showed us that how to get the economy moving, and that's when people are building things. The same is for expansion of Medicaid. I mean, that is $1 billion a year that we are turning down simply because whose idea it was, and our general fund budget is only $6 billion. We're turning it down a sixth. It would be huge. That's 10,000 jobs. That's working people building clinics in the Delta, and all over the state, really. And those are the best paying jobs in our state. If you don't care about the person from the heart, you ought to at least care about your pocketbook, and that's one of those things that would help spark our economy. And then there's other major things we need to do dealing with education. We need to implement pre-K education. I mean, that is when kids from 2 to 5 are absorbing more than any time in the rest of their lives. 85% of their brain develops during that period.
Exactly.
That's one of the things that we need to do on a statewide basis. And we need to pay our teachers. We need to fund our schools. We need to have free community college. We're doing that in my 5 counties up northeast Mississippi, and that's where Tupelo and those 5 counties around it go to get along.
I see where in Tennessee,
statewide.
that lottery that they started up there, the proceeds from the lottery go to afford free community college for any student, any young citizen in Tennessee. If they want to go to community college, they can go for free.
Yep, and we're doing that. And when we say free, we're talking about $1,450 a semester, just the tuition. It's not a free boat, full boat ride. But that is huge for technical skilled labor. That's what businesses want. They want to move in here. People that get good paying jobs, working with their hands. And then it's good for those like my kids. They've gone through the community college system up there because in northeast Mississippi, because I wanted to save some money for a 4-year school. When I remember Haley Barber said we were going to raise anybody's taxes, well, they did at our 4-year universities. When I started, tuition, room, board, and meal ticket was $4,000 a semester. Now it's $8,500, and it's going.
And we just heard that they're going to IHL has approved the 4-year institutions to raise their tuition again in the fall.
Yeah, and that just priced working people like me out of the ability to send my kids to school without debt. And that's why they're leaving. They got $40,000 of debt they can stay here in Jackson, but in a rural 2-lane road town like I'm from, they can't come back to those communities with that kind of debt unless they're, parents own a business or they got a professional degree. And so that's why our brain drain is causing so many of our young people to leave our state.
Get the heck out of Mississippi.
Yeah.
Well, look, we're going to take a quick station break, and then when we come back, we're going to open up the phone lines. If you have a question for Attorney General Jim Moore, who wants to be the next Democratic nominee and on his way to becoming the next governor of the state of Mississippi, call in to 601-948-5950. You're listening to Tell John. I'm Senator John Horhn. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
We are 90.1 FM WMPR on the World Wide Web at www.WMPR901FM.com. We are the voice of the community, Jackson, Mississippi.
we're back and we're listening to Tell John. I'm Senator John Horhn, and we've got Attorney General Jim Hood on the phone with us, on the show with us tonight, and we're going to take our first caller. You're on Tell John. Go right ahead. Yes, sir, caller.
Hello?
Yes.
I'm calling it in reference to the next governor of the state of Mississippi. And I just want to let him know that we are behind him 155 and 10/10 of a second. And we just want to let him know that we're going to elect him as our next governor of the state of Mississippi. Two things that I want to ask him not to do. Do not call your opponent's name. Just say opponent. That's something that I learned years ago about politics. You freshen your opponent's name every time you call it. You have
All right. What's the second thing, caller? Very quickly.
All right. And the second one is don't ever say when I. Not say if I. When I is the next thing. So we want to let you know that we're with you 100%, and we want you to be our next governor. And we're going to ask everybody to get out and vote for Jim Hood. Thank you, and may God bless you.
All right. Thank you, caller.
Yes, sir. Well,
We've had several callers to call in while we were talking. If you want to call back, please do so. Any comments, Jim?
sure, that's good advice. If my mother was still living, that's what she would tell me. Both of those points. You know, there's a lot that we have to do, and I wouldn't have run this race if I didn't think we could win, and if I didn't think that we had the votes in the legislature to do a lot of these things. You know, there's still a lot of work to do on mental health issues in our state. We've got reentry to deal with for those who have, we've passed legislation just turning people out but not giving them job skills and helping them get driver's license and things that will help them get a job after the fact. You know, we need to open up our government where we know the legislature is subject to the Open Records Act, so that we know who's influencing the legislature.
Transparency.
Right, and I think that will help us avoid these problems, and we can build some public roads instead of private roads for people's private gated communities.
You go on meddling now. Okay, we got another caller on line one. You're on Tell John. Go ahead. Yes, caller.
Oh, hi. My name is Deborah. I'm calling in from Byram today. Thanks for being on the show, Attorney General. I'm a public school teacher, and a lot of my friends have actually left the state because the pay is not competitive with surrounding states. And just wanted to see if you, Attorney General, think the pay raise given to teachers this past session was enough for us.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your service. I mean, taking care of our children. I mean, that's doing God's work. As a public school teacher, we need to encourage more to go to school. We need to do some tuition forgiveness programs so that we forgive tuition if teachers stay in our state and teach for 5 years, and so that they don't incur as much debt. We can help them pay off some of that. Now, that past legislative session, that $500 a year offer of a raise to the teachers was an insult to me. They need to be paid at least the southeastern average, and we just need to set up a plan so that we're able to pay them for what they're worth, and reach the southeastern average over.
Yeah, well, by the end of the session, we had come up to $1,500.
That's because of people like you that fought for it, John. I mean, that was because a lot of those
Democrats fought hard for that, I think we shamed them into raising it. Initially, they were going to do $500 a year for 2 years for a total of $1,000 raise. A teacher makes only $34,000 a year starting out. And it was just shameful that we were only going to do $500 a year, but we got it up to where come July 1st, they'll be getting $1,500 a year, but we wanted to raise it by $4,000, which would be something really meaningful for teachers. And not all if they don't clear up this glitch, we've got about a $16 million shortfall, $18 million shortfall on on paying those teachers that are in that pool. So thank you, caller. We appreciate that. We got to get to some more callers. If we can get folks, they're calling in, and we're trying to get them to hold, but they don't hold long enough to let us get them on there. But thank you, caller, and keep up the good work down in Byron.
Thanks.
All right, so Jim, we talked about the 300,000 people on Medicaid who are working poor, who would be eligible for Medicaid if the state would just accept the Affordable Care Act into Mississippi. It's just ridiculous that we don't do that. Let's take a caller again. You're on Tell John. Go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Stephen Johnson, and I'm a student at the University of Southern Mississippi. I want to ask the Attorney General, so Mississippi is losing millennials faster than every other state in the nation, and Tate Reeves barely acknowledges the brain drain and often denies it. Do you think Mississippi's millennial population loss is a problem?
Absolutely. I mean, our young people are our best and brightest asset of our state, and they're leaving. We've lost more young people than any state in the union the past 6 years, and a lot of that is because of our economy. A lot of them run up debt, and I've already talked about the fact that we need to at least do community college tuition free for those so they don't run up that debt. But we also got to create jobs. Our economy has been the worst in the nation. It's actually grown less than 1% since 2009. Not 1% a year, but I'm talking about 1% adjusted for inflation.
Right.
Tennessee has grown at a rate of about 19%. Arkansas at 14, Alabama
all the
at
states
9.
around us are showing
they're
exponential growth.
And we're doing the same thing that Bobby Jindal did in Louisiana. They gave all of our taxpayer money away to these large out-of-state corporations. They did it in Louisiana. Bobby Jindal left them $2 billion in debt down there. They did it. Brownback did it in Kansas, and it's a failed economic theory. And that's. I mean, if we just stop the bleeding, just stop giving it away, we really need some tax breaks for working people, like a grocery tax. I mean, everybody's got to go buy a gallon of milk, and wealthy and poor folks as well. And at least we ought to not have taxes on groceries. And so there's some time. It's time to cut some taxes for working folks, and working people need to be at the table when the deals are made. They've just been kicked to the curb.
Thank you, caller. All right, you're on Tell John. Go right ahead.
Yes, Mr. Hood.
Yes.
Some people are saying that you didn't endorse.
Okay, caller, if you could turn your radio down just a little bit.
That you didn't endorse Mike Espy. Can you comment on that as to why?
Caller, turn your radio down just a bit.
Yeah, I heard him. Yes, well, I did.
You're saying you did endorse Mike Espy? Yeah.
I mean, an endorsement doesn't. I probably couldn't have helped him much, but Mike and I have talked since before the race and after, and discussed the good things and the bad things that occurred. And Mike's a friend of mine, and I respect him, and he's done a wonderful job. As I said, he started the consumer protection in the AG's office and the Medicaid fraud division. Both of those divisions.
So it's not true that you did. It's not true that you did not endorse Mike. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. All right. We are still getting some callers calling in. If you want to have a conversation with the Attorney General, or if you want to make a comment or ask a question, 601-948-5950 is the number. And Jim, while we're waiting for those callers to get back on the line, we're talking about the brain drain and how our current leadership in both the legislature and in the governor's office just don't acknowledge that we've got this brain drain, and we got kids going to Austin, to Atlanta, to Houston, to Dallas, to LA, to Washington, D.C., and we're educating them. We educate them, and then we let them just run out of the state because there's not enough opportunity to keep them here, and not enough things for them to do that millennials and other recent graduates would like to do. So I appreciate your comments about that. And we've got a caller back on the line. You're on Tell John. Go right ahead. Yes, caller.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You just got a little static in it, but go ahead.
Yeah, I just have, first of all, let me say I'm glad to see that the Attorney General is running for governor and a big supporter of you. But my job requires me to travel all over the state of Mississippi, and I hear our state leaders claim that, Mississippi's economy is going so great and good. But as I travel across this state, I see people struggling, and I would like to know that the general agree with the state leaders who say our economy is in good shape.
Okay, thank you, caller. We're going to get off. You've got a lot of static on your line. All right. Jim, if you would, you've already more or less addressed this, but could you just address it a little bit more?
Yeah, because the economy has been so bad. I mean, it was USA Today had us at 4th. It was Business Insider had us at the worst economy in the nation. That's including D.C. We were 51st. Our economy's just not moving. I mean, you go to the coast, it looks good, but if you talk to builders and bankers and people that build things, that's how you move the economy. It's just not moving. Now, if you go to Madison and Rankin and some areas in DeSoto,
isolated pockets.
Yeah, it is, but it's causing our young people to leave the state. And what's more is many of them have the tech skills, the tech jobs.
Mm-hmm.
They have an idea for some app. It's probably one within 5 miles of here that has an idea for an app that they can make $1 million off of. People like you and I with gray hair wouldn't know how to use it if they gave it to us, but they can make money off of it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a big factory. You can have it eight people in an old house somewhere, putting together some kind of tech jobs, and that's the future for 2-lane road towns like I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you got a 4-lane highway, no manufacturing outfit's gonna look at you unless you've got that 4-lane highway and a school nearby that the teachers, that the executives would want to send their kids to school. And so we've got to do all we can to keep our young people here, because we're one of the few states in the union that's lost population, and that's just a sign of a stagnant economy.
Exactly. All right, we got another caller. You're on Tell John. Go right ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Horhn. First of all, thank you for operating a real good program. I guess my question, Mr. Hood, would be that those people that are somewhat disenfranchised and sort of left out, do they have a plan to bring them into a process that would help encourage them, lift them up, and even encourage them to stay here in the state as well? And I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you for that question. It's a challenge for the poor in our state. We've got to get our economy moving. Number one, as I said before, Bill Clinton showed us that if we get our economy ginning, then we can do some of the things that we really need to do for working people. I think we need to cut the grocery tax. That would be a help to poor folks. I think there needs to be more opportunities for working people and poor people to be at the table when the deals are made. We've just, they've been kicked to the curb the last 8 years. In the legislature, when the deals are made, there's only 1 or 2 people in the room. And John,
we got royally screwed this year.
But I think that the legislature that returns, they're not going to put up with that anymore. Not with that iron-fisted leadership. I think that those days are over, and I think we'll have committees that have hearings that take into consideration the problems working people have for medical care and education and transportation. I think you'll see a lot more
small business development.
Yep, and I just it's going to be a different environment. I think with just a little bit of leadership, they could have done those things before, but none of them were willing to step out and take the risk of being criticized by some of their corporate masters.
All right, we've got another caller. You're on Tell John. Go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. Kind of going, you have a great show, and I listen all the time. Attorney General Hood, we're going to hate to lose you as Attorney General, but what is it that we can do other than to really get people out of the vote to get you in stuff? We like I said, we hate to lose you as the Attorney General because you've been doing a great job and you're always for lack of a better word, for the little man. And we need you there because it is a much needed thing. But we need to get you as governor. And I'm going to hang up and let you answer my call.
appreciate your comments.
Thank you for your kind words. You know, I've loved being Attorney General, and I have been able to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. When I first came out of the chute, one of the first cases I had to deal with was Governor Barber was trying to cut 65,000 people off of the pledge, off of Medicaid.
Poverty level, aged, and disabled. And we tried to tell them, hey, you don't want to do this because this y'all folks. And they didn't listen.
Well, you know, I believe a lot of them misunderstood what Medicaid was.
Right.
You know, they thought it was like welfare. That money never touches a poor person's hands. That goes into a medical clinic, a good paying job, or a physical therapist, and those are doctors. You know, hospitals. It keeps rural hospitals open too. You know, had we accepted this $1 billion a year. Let me give you an example. You know, in the 1940s and 50s, in my hometown, Houston, Mississippi, population 3,800, we've always had an emergency room. It closed about 5 years ago. About 2 months ago, a young lady, 22 years old, she had a baby, a 1-year-old baby, and she was pregnant, had an asthma attack. The hospital's still open, so her family takes her to the hospital, but the emergency room was closed. And so they take off trying to get to the next town that has a hospital, and they stopped at the fire station, and she died. That's like a third world country. Put that in perspective. In 1940, in rural Mississippi, we had better emergency health care than we've got today. Now, that's insane for us to stand there just because whose idea it was and say we're not going to take that $1 billion. So as governor, we can make those changes. We can make changes on pre-K education and a long-term 18-year investment, but it would be huge for our young people, make college, particularly community college tuition, more affordable. And of course, I say if they want to go straight to a 4-year college, they'll be able to at least take the $1,450 a semester that a community college would be to a 4-year college. But you know, we've got a lot of work to do, but I think that we can accomplish that with a little leadership. Just common sense goes a long way, rather than all this partisan finger pointing, bickering that we see out of Washington. And hopefully that's the blessing of it all, is that we begin to come together and we start working on some of these big issues, and we can make a difference in our home state.
Very good point. And we've got another caller. You're on Tell John. Go right ahead.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm going to ask my question, what do the benefit of black people getting the guild vote, K3 vote, what you would do different for the black people that the rest of them haven't done to help us out and different things, and make sure that you don't switch over and go Republican when you become Democratic governor if you proceed in that position. We just like to know that because some black people is confused about not being able to never see you in the courtroom when you were prosecuting and you were head prosecutor with the DA, he was the DA of Hines County. So could you give us a comment on that? I think.
Sure. You had several points there. The leadership in the legislature has been controlled by large out-of-state corporations. I mean, they've given away $768 million of our tax money. And as I said, our general fund budget is $6 billion. They've given away so much to these groups that give huge campaign contributions. They kicked our Main Street merchants to the curb. They've a regular old millionaire can't influence that legislature anymore. It takes a billionaire, you know. And so, what would be the huge difference between me serving as governor and one of those who have been in leadership is who's at the table, and that's working people of all walks of life, whether black or white or whatever. But for, as one caller said earlier, for the little man, that's what I was reared in a small town at Holcomb, Mississippi. It's about a 300 population up there, and you know, I've grown up and been taught to fight for those who can't fight for themselves, and that's why you know, one of the reasons that I'm a Democrat, and the main reason is because of my religion, and that's because I believe that Jesus talked more about taking care of the least among us than anything else in the Bible. He mentions the poor. I think if you do a search of the King James Version, it's 35 times he mentions the poor, you know, the least among us. And so when I reach the pearly gates, if the good Lord lets me in, you know, I hope you know, when I'm asked the question, did you fight for the least among us, that I can say yes to that question. and that's what you would see as a difference in the
And
governor.
I say on that other point about switching, they've been after you for years, Jim, to switch over, and you hadn't done it yet. And
it ain't gonna happen.
4 terms as Attorney General. I think we got us a solid Democrat here, folks. We got another caller on Tell John, having a little trouble with the phone lines. Our apologies on that, but you're on Tell John. Go right ahead.
Hello, Senator Horn and Attorney General Hood. My name is Jeff Bridger from here in Belhaven. I just had a couple questions for you.
Go right ahead.
I was just wondering, considering the support here in Mississippi, would you ever consider voting for President Trump?
You know, I get that question a lot. It's kind of a trick question. You know, I as far as working with him, if he had some idea that would help Mississippi, I would certainly help him there. You know, particularly like infrastructure. I mean, if they want to do something that'll help us rebuild our infrastructure, we got 500 bridges closed. As governor, I would certainly work with any administration that's going to help people in the state of Mississippi.
There's a lot of talk about a possible deal between Democrats and Trump on infrastructure, and I hope they put that deal together.
Me too.
But you say, I think a lot of folks, because Mississippi went so heavily toward Trump a couple of years ago, you know, we're saying that if you're in a trick bag where someone's trying to catch you up, because the good thing about you, Jim, is that you're able to attract both Democrats and some Republicans, blacks and some whites, to your candidacy. That puts you, to me, in a good position to be able to go to Washington and bring back resources, if there are resources there for Mississippians. And I think that's the issue that we've got to focus on is I think a lot of folks don't like Trump, even the Republicans who support Trump, but they say they like some of the things he's doing for the economy, and they're willing to excuse his behaviors otherwise on that. But you know, I'll tell you what, I would not be supportive of Trump, but I'd be supportive of a program Trump's got that's going to help Mississippi. You know, and that's just my 2 cents worth with it. You have another question, caller?
Yes, sir. Now, did y'all think that Ole Miss made the right decision removing the Confederate statue from the circle out in front of the Lyceum?
Yeah, Jim, I don't know if you have a point on that, but my answer to that is, I think they've moved the statue to a more appropriate location, which is in the cemetery of Confederate buried veterans or soldiers, and I think that was a good move on the part of the university. You know, personally, I think that when you talk about statues, and we have to tell our history. And what I'm more interested in is balancing out the history. We need some more black statues in Mississippi that tell the whole story about Mississippi. But thank you for your call.
Thank you all.
I'm sorry, I cut them off. If they can, you get them to call back, because I just unfortunately cut the last caller off. While we do that, let's maybe we'll get that last caller back on. Let's take a quick station break. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll go to this caller. Okay, you're on Tell John. Go right ahead.
Hey, I have a question for the Attorney General. When Robert Schuller Smith announced his candidacy for governor, there were some charges brought up against him. What would you say to those people that would say that those were trumped-up charges just to disgrace his candidacy?
You know, I don't know what charges you're talking about. That all happened several years ago. But I didn't make any comment about, you know, any person's candidacy. You know, my mother taught me to you know, if you hadn't got much good to say about folks and don't say anything at all, and I try to follow that. I've found that in politics, if you know, talk about what you want to do, then people appreciate that, and that's sort of my position in this primary and in this general election.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any charges that came out when Robert Schuler Smith announced his campaign for governor. But thank you, caller. You're on Tell John. Go right ahead. Yes, caller.
Hello. I would like to know, Attorney General Hood, can you tell me, what do you think about Tate Reeves trying to build a private road from his gated neighborhood to a shopping center?
Well, my comment would be that, that's the problem in our state, and people, Republicans and Democrats, don't like insiders cutting deals and feathering their own cap, whether it be a road to their own property or which some of that influence may be legal, but it's inappropriate. I mean, we got 500 bridges closed in our state. There was a ton of projects that were way ahead of that one, and by using political force, he was able to push the Department of Transportation into considering that, and then they retracted that now that it came to the light of day. And there again, that's the media, the fourth estate, which is so important to our way of government. And now of all times, it's been vitally important that they disclose that, and so people know when politicians are taking care of themselves rather than taking care of the people that they're supposed to represent.
All right, thank you, caller. And we're going to take our last caller of the evening because we got to wrap this thing up. You're on Tell John. Go right ahead.
Okay, I'd like to ask the Attorney General, what are your views, that this question has not been asked, what are your views about displacing the state flag? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Could you turn your radio down just a little bit, caller?
It's some
Okay,
reverb.
I think we've got the gist of the question, so we're going to get the call off the line. So your thoughts about the flag?
Well, when I think it's over 50% of the people don't support a symbol that is supposed to unify us, then you ought to change it to one that will unify the people of our state. And we've got plenty of dividers, and historically, throughout the ages, there's been those groups that try to divide us rather than let us work together. And that symbol that we presently have doesn't represent any unity, and I think it needs to be changed. And I've been on record for several years saying that.
Okay. All right, well, we've had a very stimulating conversation with Attorney General Jim Hood, who is seeking the Democratic nomination to be the next governor of the state of Mississippi. And General Hood, we've got a couple of minutes left. I want to have you have the opportunity to make any closing remarks that you'd like to make.
Well, John, thank you for having me on. I've enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed the calls. I learned from listening to people. But, there's some change that we need to make in our state, and I encourage people to get out and encourage their friends to go vote, because it'll make a difference. We can win this race in the fall. We've been up in the polls the past couple of years, and I have no doubt that we can win it if we unify and work together to make that happen. And we can change, the trajectory of our state. We can do better infrastructure, roads and bridges, health care, schools, and have a government that works for working people rather than billionaire corporations.
Well, thank you so much, General Hood. And, WMPR has a reach of, in some places, as much as a 100-mile radius from Jackson, certainly about a 90-mile radius. But right here in Hinds County alone, we have 182,000 registered voters. Just imagine if we could get 65-70% turnout. Even if you get even higher, that'd be fantastic. But we did a 44% turnout 4 years ago in Hinds County. And if we were able to muster more folks actually getting out who are eligible, already registered to vote, out there to vote, we could have a tremendous impact on just about every statewide race in the state of Mississippi. Hinds County could have that impact. And so we're going to keep talking about that issue, because folks, we can control a lot more of our destiny than we have been in recent years, and we need to do it with the power of the ballot. Well, John Wesley said it best: do all the good you can by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. But Medgar Evers, Lord Medgar, he said it best: if you don't vote, you don't count.
For the last hour, you've been listening to Tell John, a community affairs talk show hosted by Senator John Horhn. Join us each and every Monday night at 7 p.m. here on 90.14 Tell John.